everybody. Buenas tardes or buenos dias, depending where you are in the United States. My name is Trisha Cortez, Executive Director with the Rio Grande International Study Center in Laredo, Texas, and my colleague Martin Castro and I are going to co-present. I'm going to do the first 20-25 minutes, and then he's going to do the second half. And we're here to, give you some news about South Texas here on the border. And my presentation is going to be an uplifting story about this David versus Goliath battle that we undertook with the border wall and the outcome of that. So I want to share it with you. So let's get started. All righty, let's see here. So I always like to share, these are just some of my favorite quotes about social change, which is what each of you are part of. That's why you're attending the Green Latino Summit and this particular session. It comes from your heart, the passion of individuals. And every moment, as Dolores Huerta, taught us, is a chance that we have to change the world. So this talk is going to focus on our the work that we undertook over 3 years with the border wall. And for us, we didn't go picking this fight, but for us, this was a battle for the very soul of Laredo. And so what I want to talk about, as I mentioned, is this David versus Goliath battle that we undertook and how we prevailed. So as you all know and can remember, the wall was about massive destruction, right? And a lot of money. And the previous administration had awarded 4 contracts for Laredo, the Laredo sector, which is 2 counties here in South Texas, Webb and Zapata, more than $1 billion in tax dollars to confiscate and seize public and private land to destroy 71 riverfront miles. And you'll see these companies, some of the typical cast of characters that were you heard a lot about during the previous administration. And just to put this into perspective, this was no ordinary wall. Not that any wall should be ordinary between countries, but this wall was a 30-foot steel wall, more than twice the height of the Berlin Wall. And this is what it was going to look like. We took the renderings of what this wall was. These are neighborhoods here in Laredo by the river. And, it was really, really going to profoundly change our landscape and remove access that we have to the river, our lifeblood, forever. We're an environmental nonprofit. We've been here almost 30 years, and we have always been centered around the river and its ecosystem. So, these are some of our parks and trails that are built up along the river, and this is how they would have changed very profoundly. And, during this battle, we heard this all the time from elected officials, business people who were sympathetic to our cause and those who weren't. And we heard over and over and over, this is a done deal. Don't antagonize the federal government. We need those funds to help our community. The money's already there to do this. Why can't you compromise? Right? I mean, like you were really going to be able to compromise with the last administration, right? But this is a done deal. They underestimated us. And we worked our butts off. We were relentless. We worked with Earth Justice, became a lead plaintiff. This lawsuit is still in the DC federal courts. We built a very diverse coalition, unique, strange coalition of people. Our first attempt failed at that coalition. The second time around, we got it. And we pressured and we didn't stop. I wanted to show, although I don't know if this is going to work. Here's a short 2-minute video of things that we did all the time.
Right now, Laredo faces one of the biggest challenges in its history. As longtime Laredoans, we love our city. We're proud of our history. We value our public places, our connection to each other, and to our river. When our city is threatened, we take a stand. At this very moment, the federal government is pushing through a dangerous project that would harm our city, creating a false sense of crisis that does not actually exist here, while pushing aside over 25 laws to deprive our community of equal rights and constitutional protections.
We have seen the official plans. It is not just a fence. It is a 30-foot tall wall that will carve a path of destruction through our city, half the width of a football field, impacting everyone who lives in Laredo. The wall would cripple many of our beloved public spaces, our neighborhoods and homes, ranches and small businesses, historic structures and houses of worship. It would cut us off from contact with the source of all life here, our river. It would make many of our communities feel imprisoned. And the cost? $275 million for 14 miles, almost $20 million a mile. Instead of funding a wall, we could be funding our future.
My name is Trisha Lopez.
My name is Sasha Lopez.
My name is Shirley Laurent.
There's good news. The wall is not a done deal. Together, we can stop it, but it requires our elected officials to stand with us. Our numbers are growing every day, and our coalition is expanding. Today, we ask that you join us in supporting this new campaign. Defund the wall, fund our future. We can show the country that we are leaders in this fight. The health and well-being of our community does not need to take a back seat. It's time that we take control of our own future. If you fight for Laredo's future, you know that the people of Laredo have got your back. Join us.
All right. And then let me see how, okay. Let's see here. Let me see how I get out and go back. Oh, here we go. Okay. And this was sort of our whole strategy, the way we figured it out, you know, to do these sort of national kind of bigger battles, you need to come at it from different angles. And we had 3 tracks that we worked on. We had a very robust, layered legal track working at different levels. We had a political track, you know, working with elected officials at different levels. And then we had people power. We had to mobilize the grassroots. You know, that's where the power rests, and that's where the power lies. And our strategy, we kept it super simple. We didn't, you know, we made a very concerted decision to not get involved with immigration, to not just drop it all and just focus on delaying as long as we could construction of that wall on our lands and the seizure of land, and canceling the wall in the event that Trump would lose in the fall. We didn't know if that would happen, but this is where our strategy was. And so our main campaign was defund the wall, fund our future. You know, we took that off of the George Floyd, uprising that took place. We spoke with different members of Black Lives Matter, you know, to not co-opt their stuff, but tell them, you know, we're facing something kind of similar here on the border of deep injustice, and we don't want money to go toward militarization and crisis where it doesn't exist and have that be the narrative that defines and shapes us. You know, we want to fund our future and highlight everything that we represent here on the border, which is far more than just the narrative, the disaster narrative that they painted of us. And our coalition was quite diverse. We had people from all walks of life, even Republicans, a few Trump supporters, believe it or not, people from different backgrounds that just saw how illogical and destructive this project would be for us. We did a lot of events along the river. We had marches. We worked closely with tribal groups as well. You know, we did our, you know, protests on the river, you know, when Nancy Pelosi and we had elected officials from DC and Mexico City here on the bridge for this big ceremony that happens every February, and we disrupted it with our kayak event there. And it was COVID, which made it very challenging to figure out how to create actions that would make Laredo a national story. That's what we had to figure out. We'd never done a campaign of this size, but the wall was a national story because it was the pillar of a presidential campaign. And so we had to think as big as we could and figure out how do we make Laredo a national story. And so we started to do like protests like this outside of the federal courthouse. There were a lot of people that couldn't go because of COVID, but they gave us our boots and their chanclas, that we just put out there. We tried to reach out to the hundreds of landowners along the river. There's some very big ones. There's some very, like half an acre kind of plot of land. And we tried to get them to not sign the rights of entry unless they consulted with our team of attorneys. We did a lot of that work. And this is when Laredo became the national story. We became the first border city to do a street mural, and it was massive, and it was in front of the federal courthouse on Victoria Street because we wanted to achieve victory. The letters were 30-foot big because that's the size of the wall. And, to do this in a place like Laredo that's fairly conservative was a massive undertaking for us to make it happen. And on the day that we did this, in August of 2020, Steve Bannon and all his minions, they just lit into us, and it was like it went so viral, like 250,000 hits, and so we knew we'd hit our target, which was the White House, and we weren't backing down. So then a huge Trump train formed in Laredo, and they were going to part of their plan was to go over our mural and deface it, and we beat them at that. That was another huge battle, but still they came from all over Texas and waving their Confederate flags and telling us the F word and shooting the finger and stuff like that. But we stayed as respectful as we could, and then we did a long virtual 2,000-mile concert with Academy Award singers, and this was again another 250,000 viral hits. And part of our campaign wasn't just about no wall. It was like, look, you're going to spend massive amounts of federal money. Let's put it where it would really make a difference here with the needs that we have, and to make us an economic leader for our region, because 1 mile of wall was anywhere from $18 to $24 million. And we did extensive research working with all the institutions, asking them, what could you do for the cost of 1 mile of wall? And, we could plant 130,000 trees here, get 300,000 vaccines, or electrify our entire El Metro bus fleet, or 31 miles of the 71 they wanted to make could put solar rooftops on a third of all of our houses here. And this drew attention. We were featured in a Showtime documentary called Bad Hombres, made by Andrew Glazer, and I encourage y'all to see it at some point. And we didn't stop even after Biden won. We didn't know what exactly that meant for us. And so right around the time of the inauguration, we did billboard campaigns across from his headquarters in Wilmington and Laredo, and reminding him of his campaign promise. And, we did these actions in like 15 cities with partners along the border. Again, it was COVID, and we had to be very strategic of how we did this. We wanted to get the most amount of media out there as possible. And, we did telepressers, with all sorts of people. And then we were relentless on the legal front, and because we worked with a landowners coalition as well that joined us, and it was a very robust legal thing. So in the end, last summer and fall, in July, they decided to cancel the first 2 border wall contracts, and they were for Laredo, 2 of the 4. And then on October 8th, we found out that they were going to cancel the last 2 for Laredo, and new contracts in the Valley. Although the Valley has older contracts that they're trying, and we are supportive of their efforts, to try to get those congressionally supported contracts from way back rescinded, those funds. But we saved so much. Laredo is built up against the Rio Grande. It's why we were founded in 1755, before the United States was founded. And we were able to save parks and trails and ranches, private homes, businesses, part of Laredo College, the Catholic orphanage, and just archaeological sites, burial sites, just iconic river sites. We stopped the wall, but it's still not over. There's right-wing political forces like vultures just circling around South Texas, and they've made some inroads, and they're seeking to build their power. The local GOP and the state GOP last spring invited this guy to come speak, at the river, and he just got prosecuted, not just arrested, but prosecuted last week by U.S. prosecutors for conspiracy. And we know that we're constantly under threat, and therefore the wall, etc. So and it's not just in DC, but it's also in Austin. Governor Greg Abbott, he's he's up for re-election, and the wall and immigration, it's low-lying fruit for that base. And we fought this, and city council told Greg Abbott, thanks, but no thanks. We don't need your wall with cyclone fence here in Laredo. And so we've had to remain very vigilant and be on constant guard, and to try to do this. So as far as what we've got going on the border wall, we're going to undertake an action alert with the U.S. Senate Appropriations for Homeland Security to get them to rescind all previously border wall authorizations and rescind that, because we'll always be at risk for that if there's a change in Congress or a change in the administration. And we want them, I didn't put it on here, we want them to stop with the waivers of law. That happens nowhere else except here on the border and on tribal lands. And what they do is that they waive all legal protections and federal laws like the Clean Water Act, Safe Drinking Water Act. There's many of them. They waive those in order to rush these kinds of projects, especially the NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act. So we are still working to try and get that process eliminated because of how it puts us it disenfranchises us and puts us in the realm of second-class American citizen. And I just wanted to end with beautiful artwork. You have to have art and beauty in life to get through, really dark times. And we worked with about 55 artists, some who have their work in the Smithsonian that have some kind of connection to Laredo. And they did this project for us last October. It was the first river-themed art project that we had been undertaken in Laredo, and it was the first time we did it. And there were just really beautiful pieces that I just wanted to share with you. Some very inspiring about who we are and what the border is, its people, and you have to have a little sense of humor sometimes too, right? So we did that, and really we were trying to protect it for. And I don't mean to get emotional because I have little kids. These aren't mine, but I have a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old. And I didn't want them to grow up in a legacy where they would never have access to the river the way that we have taken it for granted for a couple of hundred years. And in the process, these areas were saved, these ecological treasures along the river bend and Las Palmas Nature Trail. And I wanted to leave y'all with something so uplifting. The U.S. Ambassador to Mexico, Ken Salazar, he came here and he appointed our group, our organization, to serve on a very small binational working group that is going to work to build a binational river park project here, and it's going to encompass these stunning areas. And I mean, what a way to end that story, you know. And I think we've got 5 minutes for questions, and then I have to turn it over to my colleague Martin. Um, but I'd love to hear any thoughts or questions or comments you might have.
Trisha, there's a question in the group chat. Tiffany, I don't know if you want to read it out for her, or I can if you'd like.
I don't know how to find that, Martin. Sorry.
Okay, I'll just
Oh,
go
I
ahead.
see it. Oh, okay. Go ahead, Martin.
Okay. So this is a question, anonymous question. What are some of the indigenous communities that you collaborated with?
Yes. So here in South Texas, the Carrizo Come Crudo tribe, we worked with them and we're still working with them. We also worked with the Tohono O'odham in the New Mexico area and the Sonoran part of northern Mexico and southern Arizona. And then we also worked with the Kumeyaay tribe out of San Diego that's had to endure a lot of this as well. And one of our partners too were Lakota, Lakota activists from Standing Rock. You know, they came for our MLK Day, I Have a Dream, No Border Wall March, and they carried out actions. We still collaborate with them. And also we worked with the Native Society. I'm blanking right now, but you know, we were in touch with some of their and because they're kind of spread out, and so we also you know, we were having weekly calls with them, planning out these actions, especially the one in January around the time of the inauguration. And you know, like I said, it's not over, right? You know, we are trying to counter that crisis narrative, right? Every time you hear about the border, you turn on the news, it's going to be we're painted in a very particular way that is so narrow, and part of our work is to shift that narrative, to tell our own stories and try to amplify that as best as we can. And this binational river park project is going to be one of those stories that I hope you're going to be hearing about more over the next couple of years. And the work that Martin is doing right now with water security and forming a brand new watershed planning group for our region as well. So I think I have 1 more minute. I don't know if anybody else has any questions. Well, thank y'all so much. I'm going to stop sharing, and I think I have to turn off my video and then turn it over to Martin.
Alrighty, Trisha, thank you so much for that presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll move on to the next part of this session. So just give me a few moments here while I get my screen ready to share.
And I don't know if Mark is on here, but just a big shout out to you, Mark, and Green Latinos. I love this group, and I hope we can reconvene in persona, you know, again soon. You know, I did the last one in the Adirondacks in upstate New York, and what an experience that was. So I look forward to the next one.
Alrighty. Can everyone just want to confirm? Can everyone see my screen? I
Yes.
can't see any thumbs up. Okay, so we're good. All right, because all I can see is the PowerPoint. Alrighty, so welcome everyone. Thank you, Trisha, for that presentation. I'd like to welcome everybody to our session here at the Green Latinos 21-22 Winter National Summit. My name is Martin Castro. I am the Watershed Science Director here at the Rio Grande International Study Center, along with my colleague Trisha Cortez, our Executive Director. The presentation I have prepared for you today is more leaning on the science and data behind sort of this new initiative our organization has taken here, in the last year or so. And so we'll just go ahead and get started. Again, I introduced myself. I forgot I had this slide, but so just a little bit about me. I prior to my appointment here at the Rio Grande International Study Center, I worked as a natural resource specialist for the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. It's a state agency here in Texas, the second largest environmental agency in the U.S. after the EPA. And I worked in that capacity for about 7 years. So I bring a lot of state government background experience to this position. So that's just a little bit about me. So we'll start just these next couple of slides. I'll just present a brief overview of the Rio Grande Basin and why this river is so important to our area and millions of others on both sides of the border. So the Rio Grande is quite an extensive river. The drainage area alone is 335,000 square miles. You see the picture on the right is the entirety of the Rio Grande Basin. It encompasses several states in the U.S. and several states in Mexico. It's the third longest river in the United States, and it's in a transboundary basin, which is in a very semi-arid and very water-stressed region of the world. The total length of the Rio Grande, depending on how it's measured, is about 1,990 miles, and it is one of the top 10 most endangered rivers in the world, according to the World Wildlife Fund. The Rio Grande begins its journey up in the Colorado, in the state of Colorado, near the San Juan mountain range, and it ends its journey after 1,990 miles in the Gulf of Mexico. So quite an extensive journey from where it begins to where it ends. Now, here in our little section of the Rio Grande in Laredo, I'll just go over a few things, some more facts. Particularly, we exist in a segment between two cities near Del Rio, Texas, between Del Rio, Texas, and Zapata, Texas, which is known in this area as the Middle Rio Grande. The sections, of course, being divided into three sections in Texas: the upper, the middle, and the lower. That's in Texas. And then if you're looking at the basin overall, we considered part of the lower Rio Grande. It's not a free-flowing river. The Rio Grande is a highly managed river, at least in our area, managed through controlled releases from two international dams, Amistad International Dam in Del Rio, Texas, and Falcon International Dam outside Zapata, Texas. Now, the Rio Grande historically has faced many threats. We have, of course, threats such as pollution, invasive species, and urbanization, which has led to, of course, habitat loss, reduced flows as a result of ongoing drought, and increasing temperatures, of course, exacerbated by climate change, and many others, of course. And all of these just add additional burdens to this already highly distressed river system, unfortunately. Now, some background. So, the heart of this presentation and sort of this new initiative that our organization has taken is part of this new water security, land, and climate change initiative. And I'll go over just briefly how the work that I'll be presenting later in this presentation ties into this new program. And so, when we talk about water security, we have to discuss several aspects of it, because water security alone is a very sort of a broad term, but there's a lot of nuance behind that one term. And so I'll explain what water security means. So when it comes to water security, societies and communities can enjoy water security only when they're able to successfully manage their water resources and meet the needs of each dimension of water security, which I'll show in the following representation. So for domestic water security, it means a community or communities should be able to provide all people with reliable and safe drinking water. From an economic perspective, this means that a community should strive to sustain and support productive economies in the agriculture, industry, and energy sectors. From an urban standpoint, we can create better water management and services to support vibrant and livable communities. Environmentally speaking, this means the environmentally conscious restoration of rivers and ecosystems, which is a big part of the work that we're doing. And lastly, when we talk about disaster-related water security, we should strive to build resilient communities that can adapt, to change before and after major disasters such as floods, hurricanes, and all sorts of threats that threaten our region. So, why was this new program, this new initiative, developed here at our organization? Well, for starters, the work we're trying to seek is to develop a new planning group for our watershed, which is, of course, part of the Rio Grande Basin watershed. And we, in the work that's led up to this point in our organization, we discovered that no watershed planning group actually exists for our area here in South Texas for the watershed. And so we seek to obtain support to build our capacity to undertake these new projects, which are very science and data driven. And because of this, federal, state, regional, and international studies have just not fully addressed this area of the watershed. A colleague of mine sort of just put it well. I think she said, this Laredo and South Texas is just this black hole of no information. We do not have the studies, or have there been any studies, in the last decade or so that have addressed the needs of our area. So that's partly why this program was developed. And so, of course, we want to restore and build resilience. Those are sort of the two main themes that our organization is working towards. And so we have a lot of restoration and project objectives that we like to develop from this new initiative that our organization is taking. I won't go over all of them, but I'll just mention a few of them just briefly. Of course, we'd like to improve water quality and quantity in our area, increase our wildlife habitat here, of course, build community relationships between our stakeholders, and have a greater understanding of flood and drought resilience. We want to, of course, identify historical landscapes and soils that have unfortunately been lost, due to urbanization, climate change, flooding, and establish essential boundaries for future land and water development in a way that works, that's more in sync with nature, not just, building over existing, habitats or land. We want to work with developers to see that we're working one with nature and not, over it. Of course, have a greater understanding of climate impacts. So, sort of the project goals, we envision that from these objectives that we hope to identify and prioritize solutions. That's some of the, more persistent problems our watershed faces, and the future challenges in order to secure the necessary funding to begin restoring these problems. And of course, this will only be accomplished by, getting stakeholders together and drafting formal restoration plans to address the needs of our area. So we'll move on now to sort of the science and data of this presentation. And we'll go over again just the study location. As Tricia mentioned, our organization is located here in Webb County. The figure you see on the bottom left in red. Let's just give you some demographics, some facts about Webb County. It's a nearly unanimously Hispanic, with about 95% of the population identifying as such, according to the U.S. Census Bureau. It has the second highest proportion of Hispanic people in the continental United States. And this means that the highest proportion, also of the highest proportion of people among counties with a population of over 100,000 folks. Currently in Webb County, we have a population of about 200, just over 275,000 people. Laredo, of course, being the largest city in the county. So some facts about Webb County. In South Texas, oil and gas is king. If you're from Texas, you'll know that oil and gas is just sort of like, it is the biggest part of our energy sector here in Texas. But in Webb County in particular, Webb County is ranked second amongst the top 10 natural gas producers in the entire state. So just to give you all some perspective, we have on this graph here the top 10 producers in Texas. Webb County, of course, being ranked second. So that's quite a significant, place amongst those top 10. And Webb County, more specifically speaking, as it relates to oil and gas, is part of the Eagle Ford Shale geologic area, one of the largest geologic formations in the United States. Primarily here in Webb County, we're known more for producing natural gas. There is some crude oil, but the Eagle Ford Shale itself sort of has a mixture of natural gas and crude oil that is produced throughout the areas here. And you'll see the extent of the Eagle Ford Shale and sort of the counties that are highlighted within that extent. So this brings us to sort of the report, the science and data that we undertook to produce this important report called the Thirst for Water in South Texas. It is a report on the usage and disposal of water for oil and gas development in Webb County, Texas. And this was part of a grant that we had received that funds, like I mentioned, our Laredo Water Security Land and Climate Change Initiative. And we published this report in September of last year, and it details a 10-year analysis on the usage and disposal of water for oil and gas development. It is a first of its kind report for Webb County in South Texas. To our knowledge, a report like this has never been sort of published. Before we undertook this study, we really didn't know how much water was being used from the Rio Grande for oil and gas development. So this is, again, a first of its kind report. And the goal of publishing this report is to disclose to the public, local and state legislators, the true costs that sort of has been associated to oil and gas development as it relates, again, to using water from this precious river here, the Rio Grande in Webb County. How was this report produced? Producing this report, required considerable efforts across several disciplines, including data analysis, spatial analysis, investigative research, and many hours of literature review. The data for this report was primarily sourced from two regulatory agencies, the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality and the Railroad Commission of Texas. Much of this data, and I mean much, had to be acquired. The only way it was acquired through the filing of public information requests, or PIRs, may be known as Freedom of Information Act requests to some of you. They're essentially the same thing. Additionally, we had a tremendous amount of work, poring over many public databases to acquire much of the data used in this report. But the report primarily concerns two areas we've studied, and that is, of course, the usage of water from the Rio Grande that has been used for oil and gas development in Webb County, and the disposal of water that has been used for oil and gas development in Webb County. So compiling this information was no easy task. Our organization retrieved and analyzed data throughout a 10-year period, beginning from January 1st, 2010 to December 31st, 2020. And we organized this information in a series of graphs, charts, and other figures in a manner that we believe has been most accessible for the public to understand. And I'll go over what we uncovered in the next slide, which is staggering to say the least. So what we uncovered during our research and investigation was alarming. So overall, in a 10-year period from 2010 to 2020, oil and gas operators in Webb County diverted, and when I mean diverted, they pumped out water from the Rio Grande. They diverted approximately 19.2 billion gallons, that's a billion with a B, of surface water from the Rio Grande specifically for oil and gas development. Additionally, operators also disposed of over 1.79 billion gallons of highly hazardous produced water. Produced water is a byproduct, a wastewater byproduct of oil and gas development, highly toxic, highly saline, into various disposal well sites from oil and gas production across Webb County. Additionally, I also uncovered that these operators built many of these disposal wells that accept this hazardous produced water in close proximity to impoverished communities in Webb County, primarily near colonias. Additionally, we found some discrepancies throughout our reporting. Much of this data was not publicly accessible. As I mentioned, this had to be acquired through filing public information requests. And we also found that some of these operators were just not, they had missing reports. Some of this data was incomplete. So it was, it's not the full picture, but it's pretty close. And so by publishing this report, we've made several recommendations to our state legislators. For example, when it concerns on the amount of data that has been, the amount of water that's been diverted for water from the Rio Grande for oil and gas development, the primary agency, the TCEQ, we're urging them to publish and make this self-reported water usage data available for all users in the Rio Grande Basin, as it already does for some areas of the state. It just doesn't do for this area. And so we're also urging TCEQ and state legislators to change the rules regarding the reporting of what they call mining water or water for oil and gas development to clearly indicate what the water was used for. We say oil and gas development is a broad term, but the state law does not require operators to specifically identify whether it was used for fracking, sand and gravel washing, other uses in the term that falls under mining is what they call it. And of course, urge the other state regulator, the Railroad Commission of Texas. As I mentioned, there was some lack of available records, particularly concerning disposal of waste of this highly hazardous produced water byproduct. And so we urge them to, investigate why these records were missing from these operators. These operators are required to report to the state, and our analysis indicated that not all of them were reporting as they were supposed to. And to investigate and confirm the inactivity or activity of approximately 20 wells that we identified in our analysis. A lot more discrepancies than just missing records. We do not know for sure if some of these wells that are located near these impoverished communities are even active or not, even though the state databases say they are. And in Webb County, we do not have what is called a groundwater conservation district. And so we've urged for the new creation of one, simply to provide for the monitoring, conservation, preservation, and protection of these valuable groundwater resources that we have here in Webb County. And we're almost done here. I'd just like to mention that our report was featured in various news outlets. It was published a news outlet here in Texas, actually in the U.S., a border report by Sandra Sanchez, featured on an interview with Univision and local news stations here in Laredo. And so I'll close out why this work is important. As we know, water, connects all aspects of growth and development. And water is a critical resource for human health, economic growth, and agricultural productivity. Secondly, when we talked about water security earlier in my presentation, we talked about how water security can only be achieved when there is enough water for everyone and in a region, and when the water supply is not at risk of disappearing or at risk of contamination. So the work our organization is doing will be done in such a way that we will be disseminating the information and feedback from the public and data that we've acquired from these regulators to identify some of the more persistent problems our watershed faces, aka the report I produced. Because securing our water will be essential to ensure a better future for generations to come. And so to conclude, we here at RISC see at the Rio Grande International Studies Center foresee a future where we have established greater water security for Laredo and our surrounding communities. As we previously mentioned, we are in the process of creating this new watershed group for our little area here in South Texas, and create a sort of a restoration plan to propose solutions to the problems our watershed is facing. And of course, this will only be done so we can eventually foresee being able to secure funding to begin restoring the watershed. Alrighty, so at this time, I'll go ahead and open it for question and answers. Let me see if I can monitor the chat. I'll just go ahead and stop sharing my presentation. Go back here. Alrighty. Does anybody have any questions? Any comments? Just want to keep it on the chat here. Okay, here I think I see some questions coming in. I'll read off here. Brenda, does the report? I'm going to repeat your question. Does the report have a list of demands for how to improve the river? Overall, the report sort of addresses sort of the some of the more detailed aspects, such as, for example, this data is not actually it's publicly available, but it's not in a format where the public can access it. I think overall, the watershed restoration plan that our organization is currently working on right now will have a list, not really demands, but proposed solutions based on data, science, and literature that we have sort of assembled to propose solutions. For example, water quality, of course, being a big one. There's a lot of data on water quality. There just hasn't been enough attention to it. There has been, but trying to come up with solutions to how to improve. That's one aspect of how we're going to improve and come up with solutions to improve, the river here. And okay, Alma, I see a question here. Where does the city of Laredo get its drinking water from? The city of Laredo, the Rio Grande is the only source of drinking water for our area and for millions of other people on the river. It's primarily just surface water. It does not get water currently from any other source. I know there are ongoing studies right now, and this wasn't in the presentation, but just to give you sort of an idea, there was a water planning group that released a report last year for our area that has projected that in the next 50 years, our population here in Webb County is expected to increase tenfold. And what that means is in just 20 years, the Rio Grande will not be able to sustain this projected population increase simply because it will not be able to provide enough water for all those who depend on it. And so right now, the city of Laredo is currently taking studies to identify alternative sources of water to make sure that there is enough supply to meet the demand in the next 20 years. So I believe that hopefully, some of these studies will address this because time is running out, to say the least. But to answer your question again, the Rio Grande is our only source of drinking water. I see one more from Isabel. I'll just go and read your question. Isabel, there are protections, I believe, against CAFOs for sole source aquifers. Are you aware of any similar protections for surface water? Protections, Isabel. Let me see here. Protections for sole source aquifers. Can you sort of give more details or more context behind your question? Okay, I see here, Isabel. To limit development, at least on the river. Similar protections for surface water. Just trying to make sense of your question. To limit development. Well, there are sort of limits, I guess, on how much entities can pump from the river. But are you referring, if you're limiting to limit what kind of development exactly?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I
Yes.
can.
Okay. So I'm thinking of, for example, like in the Panhandle, you have CAFOs, and there's certain protections on where you can site it if there's a sole source aquifer. And I'm not recalling if it's just like enhanced protections, or you can't be on it. I guess you can't be on it if you don't have those. So, those are sole source aquifers, and there's other things. I know the state maintains a list. And I know surface, of course, like surface water is different, but that offers, a lot of rural communities protection if they're relying just on the one aquifer. And you guys are, relying just, and you're not the only city relying just on surface water. So I don't know if that's something you have discussed or
That's
you're
correct.
aware of.
Yes. Well, again, so one thing I mentioned in my report, and one thing I wanted to analyze is I analyzed as part of this 10-year study that we undertook. We wanted to know, for example, as part of one of the grant deliverables, but we wanted to know also, how much groundwater has been used for oil and gas development. So, what are the sort of protections the state has? And to put it short, here in Texas, groundwater, with the exception of some areas in Texas, such as in San Antonio, where we have groundwater conservation authorities, in our areas here, where number one, there is no groundwater conservation district, some of these groundwater resources are, essentially they're not unprotected, but they're unregulated. We have this, Texas has this rule called the rule of capture, where individuals, entities, landowners can pump out as much water as they need to for any usage. It doesn't have to be just oil and gas development, but they're not required to. They're not regulated, so they're not required to report usage to any entity to meter this water. They're not required to account for it. It's essentially like a wild west out here in the areas where there's no accountability, to say the least, for these resources. But again, it is. We are here in Texas where more regulations are always, advocating for more regulations. Will always be pushback. So, that's something we'll have to address, certainly, and it's certainly something we're continuing to look at. I have a few more questions. That have come in. Let's see here. I think we still have some time, folks. So we have about 5 more minutes. Let me see here. I see one from Alma. Thank you. Water security is, of course, a concern for El Paso, which, to my knowledge, increasingly relies on groundwater. Do you know if there's any organization doing your type of work in the El Paso area? Alma, I believe there are some organizations. There was a professor I was in touch with at my old job that was doing a lot of research into uh, and I think a person I met earlier last year, excuse me, that I can maybe put you in touch with. If you want to send me an email, I can type my email in the chat, and I can do some more research on my part. But I believe there are some um, organizations certainly doing work up in El Paso, because I know El Paso and its sister city, Ciudad Juarez, is 100% reliant on groundwater for its main source of drinking water. But El Paso, I think, if I remember correctly, at a conference I attended last year in September, has done a lot of great progress in terms of, I think, reusing some of the wastewater that it currently it has for drinking water, if I'm not mistaken. But I can put you in touch with some folks. Okay, I see a few more questions. I have one from Gigi. Do you know if there is similar research for other areas of the Rio Grande River, or are they also in the dark usage of the water? I'm curious about the Rio Grande Valley region. Let's see here. So, believe it or not, um, the Rio Grande is in Texas, at least. Overall, it's a well-studied river. It's just that there's certain areas where there are exceptions. Our area is not to say it's never been studied. It has been studied before, but it just doesn't bring us enough attention as it does for other areas. For example, you mentioned the Rio Grande Valley. The Rio Grande Valley has been quite extensively studied, and there's been a lot of research behind it because in the Rio Grande Valley, as you know, agriculture is sort of a king down there, and so there's always been a lot of attention, and it has been for many years. So there are groups like ours and that have addressed these issues in the Rio Grande Valley. Of course, their concerns down there are more related to water quantity and water quality, of course. Ours too, but with agriculture being such a high driver for the economy out there, the shared concerns are a little bit different. And then of course we're also stuck between upstream of our region. We have, of course, sort of sandwiched between the monster of agriculture downstream in the Rio Grande Valley, but upstream of us, the Rio Conchos, which is the largest tributary on the Rio Grande River, and all the sort of flows that it provides, which has been studied extensively. And then sort of us here in this little sandwich between both of these huge regions, these important regions. But again, that's why this program is being developed, and why we're trying to bring more attention to not just these two areas that have always been studied, but to say, hey, we're also part of the same area. Don't forget about us, to say the least. But yeah, certainly there are other parts of the river that have been studied as well. Okay, see here. I see one more question from Brenda. Just have a few minutes left. Do the proposed solutions include equity for the communities that are impacted by water quality? Yes, I believe. I think so. There are some funding sources that one of the sort of major funding sources that in this report that this regional water planning group sort of addressed is to secure funds from the Texas Water Development Board, one of the largest funders of local water and local and state water resource projects in the entire state. And part of it, being also the North American Development Bank to secure funding to address the water quality issues that our community is facing. So yes, there are solutions currently in the works, but this new restoration plan that we're building, we're currently sort of building out with our stakeholders and the public. Will include solutions to include hopefully to secure funding, for the communities that have been impacted historically by water quality for many years, here in our area, and that's essentially why this organization was founded, because of the concerns of water qualities in the early 90s. Water quality was not really, it was a huge issue, but no one really, again, sort of was paying attention to our area. And so the history of this organization, it was founded on the concerns about the impacts of water quality for our river and for our area. Okay, alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all very much for attending our presentation today. It is currently 2 p.m. I'd like to thank our presenters, my colleague Trisha, for her presentation. Thank you all very much for your questions. We will see you all soon. If you all have any questions, please, I can be in touch with any folks. Thank you all very much.